Do the impossible, see the invisible. Row, row, HiroBabble.
Touch the untouchable, break the unbreakable.
Row, row, HiroBabble.
What you're gonna do is sit and listen to.
HiroBabble,
This is the theme of the G coming through, baby.
Row, row, HiroBabble.
HiroBabble, baby, we gon' fight the power.
Hey, hello, and welcome back to the HiroBabble podcast. I'm Michael.
And I'm Spencer.
And we're coming to you today with a little bit of a special episode. Something a little bit more upbeat, a little more fun, if you will. And that is Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann. Spencer and I were really excited about the prospect of this movie. Well, not this movie, but both movies. All the Lights in the Sky Are Stars and Childhood's End. Coming to theaters in the States for the 15th anniversary. And they were doing special showings in 4DX, which, Spencer, you hadn't done a showing of that either prior to seeing these, right?
I've never done 4DX. I did Shrek 4D once, but that's it.
Yeah, that's actually the closest I could describe it for anyone who's listening and hasn't gone and seen a movie in 4DX. The closest comparison is if you were to go to Universal Studios, Disney, or Islands of Adventure, one of those theme parks that has one of the 4D experiences. They had like Jimmy Neutron back in the day. They had a Spider-Man one, where you're basically sitting in effectively a moving row of chairs that constantly tilt and lurch forward and back, and they shake and stuff gets sprayed at you or whatever. Now just imagine all of that in like a movie theater, just like just I don't know, it's a weird experience because it really is like a theme park style attraction, but you're just going to see it on a Wednesday night and you just gotta roll with it.
Yeah, it was a lot more motion than I thought it was going to be. Like they did for anybody that hasn't done 4DX, it is worth going and seeing something at least once in 4DX to know if you like it or hate it. Yeah. But they, how like when you go and see a movie, there's like a little entry. There's like a little like a trailer for like the movie theater. Like Regal has like their roller coaster thing, or like AMC had the, Nicole Kidman thing or whatever that's going away. But like this had like its own 4DX intro where they absolutely throw you through the ringer of like a guy riding a motorcycle and sliding underneath a semi while it blows up, and it's just you are thrown to the wolves to either sink or swim in a 4DX environment immediately. And the creators of Gurren Lagann, they didn't hold back in these movies, I felt like.
No, they didn't. Yeah, it was pretty cool after they did kind of the 4DX trailer. They showed many interviews with some of the prominent members of production from Gurren Lagann, which was really cool. It included Hiroyuki, I think I'm pronouncing this right, Imaishi. He was the series director, so he was there and was really just kind of reflecting on how awesome it's been that even 15 years later, this series still has legs. And then I believe it also had Kazuki Nakashima, who was also a part of the production process. And he made a comment where they were talking about when they were testing these movies out in theaters in Japan, they got final say in tweaking all of the effects that you would experience. And for the first movie, they're like, yeah, you guys should be okay. And then Kazuki goes, wait, is this the first or the second movie? And then someone from behind the camera goes, oh, it's the first. And he goes, oh, you guys will be fine then. But then the second movie, one of them commented that they lost their wallet and keys. And it was just cool to kind of, I don't know, just know that we had that to look forward to. Because we saw both movies a week apart in 4DX. So if they ever do it again, I highly recommend it. But it was truly I don't know, I hope not, but it felt like a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
Yeah, it was cool. I was happy to be a part of it, coming to 4DX and being able to see it with you. It was also one of the first times that Fernie and I watched any of these like anime properties together, because typically how we've done the show is we watch it apart. That way our first time talking about it is the podcast. That's what the podcast is. So this was kind of like we experienced 40X and went through it together, but we couldn't really talk about it too much. So we had to kind of like hold our tongue for a month or so.
Totally. Well, and it was cool too, just getting to like shoot glances at each other when something crazy happened, either on screen or our seat like threw us in the air. You know, it was a really, really cool dynamic. But yeah, so I mean, I guess just kind of jumping right into it, we'll start with just kind of discussing the first Gurren Lagann movie, Childhood's End. You know, and for the record, Gurren Lagann is one of my all-time favorite series. I watched it probably around 2 years after it had initially aired when it came to Netflix, and I was hooked. I think the series front to back is one of the best paced and just well-formatted shows that really subverts the mecha genre. It also really subverts expectations, and you know, just a heads up, there will be spoilers, and we'll kind of elaborate on what that entails. But I think the movies are a really great way to get your feet wet. I think they bring a lot to the table. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I certainly thought so. I have not seen a lick of Gurren Lagann. I had only heard of it in passing from talking to you or maybe a couple of our buddies, but I'd never seen any of it. I had no idea of any of the characters, what the stories were. I could not have told you that it was anything mech related. I had no idea walking into that theater what we were seeing. And I found it to be very approachable, given, you know, the movies are a little different than the show. Obviously the show is approachable too, but the movies do a good job at sort of like encapsulating the feel of the show in a 2-hour piece. So I thought it was great. I had a great time.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I think that the movies, in my mind, are fantastic, self-contained versions of the show. I think you get really kind of all the highlights, and I think the pacing in the movies is breakneck because they're trying to fit 26 episodes of a show into. I think the first movie hovers around maybe like an hour and 45, and the second movie starts to push the 2-hour mark. But, you know, when you think that on average an anime episode is 23 minutes, so 23 across 26 episodes, that's a lot to squeeze in. But I think they do it well. And I think, you know, hearing you say that, Spencer, is a real testament to, I don't know, just the efforts that they've put into it. I think pay off in presenting a really accessible experience. Which is really what anime movies are for, you know?
Right. And I appreciated that. I thought I remembered them saying, because you hinted at that little interview that they did, which was very charming. They were all so nice. I thought I remember them saying that the first movie was like the first 15 episodes of the show condensed or something like that.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's a lot of work to try to figure out how to make, you know, 15 episodes of television into, you know, a little under 2 hours. I mean, that's a lot.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I will say it works in their favor because at that 15 episode mark, the show hits a time skip. And so the first movie covers pretty much all of that first half of the show. And then the very beginning of the second movie kind of wraps up that and then does the time skip jump. So they kind of have it built in like a part 1 and part 2, which is really cool. Just because I think having that separation makes sense. You know, when you're watching a show and there's a time skip, sometimes it can be a bit jarring. I don't think that's the case in the regular anime, but I think in a movie format, it only gets better, which is nice.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly those little, you know, I don't know the time skip, I guess, but like I felt like they would kind of flow some of the more filler type stuff. They'd kind of show you some highlights of those in a way that was really fun to watch. It didn't feel like, okay, well, let's just take a break until we get to the next thing. It was fun, and you were like looking, for me at least, having not seen any of it, I was really looking for story or interaction or relationships between characters and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there were so many funny moments in those little highlight sections too.
Oh, absolutely. I think from my perspective, seeing those kind of truncated bits that kind of move from major story beat to the next major story beat were really well done. In the show, I think there are a couple moments that really benefit from having more time to breathe and to be
I'm
fleshed
sure.
out. The real kind of two instances I would say that the movie, I mean, it's not anyone's fault, and I'm not saying that this takes away from the experience, but having seen the anime, it would maybe be like my one, oh, I wish they could have added or elaborated more, is the introduction of Kitan and the Black Sisters. Like that whole group is really great when they're first introduced. I think there's some really cool banter between Kamina and Kitan. You know, they're kind of two sides of the same coin, very boisterous, loud, self-assured. And in the show, you get a little glimpse of that, or in the movie, I should say, you get a little glimpse of that, but not a whole lot. And then the other part is with the introduction of Rossiu, when I don't know if you remember, Spencer, when they drop down into that cave and it's essentially another city underground. That's where they pick up Rossiu, the guy with the ponytail. And then they also get Gimme and Derry, the two little kids. Is that ringing a bell?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I think those two moments really benefit from having a little more time to breathe, especially with how Rossiu plays into the second movie. I almost feel like it's a bit of whiplash because you don't really know who he is in the first movie. And then in the second movie, let me just cap this. Spoilers. If you want to see these movies or you haven't seen the show, turn away now. If you have, keep on listening. We're glad to have you. But in the second movie, Rossiu throws Simone in jail. And I don't know, from a pure movie experience, did you feel like that was a little bit of whiplash? Not to jump from the first movie, but...
I think it definitely was. Mostly because Kitan and Rossiu are pretty major characters in the second part.
Yes.
And they didn't really get like I think what happened was they were calling they had a nickname for one of them, that like Hair Boy or something, that like came out of nowhere, and I was kind of like, I have no idea who they're even talking about.
Yeah, that was about Rossiu. I forget the dumb nickname they give him, but it's like Forehead Boy, because
yes,
because he has a receding hairline.
So I was trying to figure out like, okay, who's Forehead Boy, but it was like a pretty serious character. Yes. There was a few other characters. I mean, there's like those two kind of buff twins that seem to kind of appear out of nowhere.
Oh yeah, the Jorgen and Bakusa, the two that are always side by side, and they say dumb stuff like more meat, or blow them up, or whatever.
Yeah, they were fun.
I will say, and this is maybe the other side of the kind of when it comes to these movies and how they pick and choose where to flesh things out. In the show, none of those side characters that also pilot the gunmen with them, truthfully, I would not be able to name them in a lineup. I've seen the show maybe 3 or 4 times, and I truthfully just do not think I could reliably name my way out of a paper bag with those characters. I have them all written down just because they are pivotal members, both in the movies and the show. So I'll just kind of throw these at you, Spencer, and I want you to just take a guess on what type of gunman they piloted, okay? This is going to be a little game for you.
What do you mean by type of gunman? Like, what did it look like?
Like, for example, one guy had the monkey one. Another one had the dinosaur one. Another one had the giant cannon looking one. I don't know. Maybe that's tough because those aren't really even well defined. But when I say the name Zorthi Kanai, does anything come to mind?
Zorthi Kanai. He sounds kind of like a gruff gentleman. I can't even tell you what he looked like, but okay. I'm going to say he was the banana.
Okay, yeah. Wait, the star-looking one?
Yeah, maybe that's what it was.
That's Kitan.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go.
That one I know, but like there are other names like Arak Koga, Gumbil Kite, Tetsukan Littner, Kid Koga. He has the monkey one, the gunman that is using its hands to walk, and then the other hands have the guns. But yeah, I will say I throw that out there jokingly just because it's like even in a movie format, like whatever truncated explanations or backstory they got in the show, in the movie, it's like yeah, they're there. They just show up and
and it's hilarious to hear that. What's his name? Kitan. That I 100% thought that was a banana the entire time.
It's a star, but honestly, I would not hold it against anyone if they thought it was a banana. I feel like,
and I was fine with it. I was like, that's kind of sick.
So I guess ultimately, just to not to fully throw ourselves into talking about the first movie, but anything you wanted to mention at the top of this episode? Anything you're reading? Anything you're wanting to share with the people?
I like that. Tease them with starting a little bit of episode talk. I think I did want to say I had mentioned that the last time we did the pod, I had mentioned that Ultimate X-Men was coming out by Peach Momoko.
Okay.
And that book came out and was absolutely unbelievably cool. And it did something that a lot of people are saying is common in like manga, where she introduces a lot of very interesting, Japanese cultural ideas in her comic. And then at the end, she kind of had like a little glossary of like, okay, well, this is what I was talking about here. This is kind of the cultural meaning of this. This is kind of the traditional meaning of that. So like at one point she had like a moment where like a boy at graduation gave, I think it was like his second or third button on his school uniform to this girl that he had a crush on. And she made a point to mention like that's like a thing that you do when you graduate high school. You sort of like if you're a guy that's crushing on a girl, you might give her that button because it's the closest button to your heart, and you never know if you're going to see that person again once you graduate. So you would give them that second button, and that would mean that means a lot if you get that second button from a guy. But it's like little things like that where I was reading this comic and I was learning a lot of like cultural touchstones about Japanese heritage and everything like that. So the book was not only incredible, she uses the character armor, the mutant armor, but she sort of, instead of making it like, oh, how rad is it that she got this like armor and now she can withstand a ton of damage, like it would have been maybe in the 90s. It was sort of more like, well, what does this armor mean? And like the character that she's building out is this person that's a very depressed person. They struggle a lot with anxiety. And what the armor represents is like her ability to repel those negative thoughts and repel that negative dark space in her life and be like true to herself. So it was just like this really beautiful comic book that seemed bigger than just like X-Men. I think it's going to be one of those series that's going to be remembered for a really long time and talked about forever. And if anybody was able to pick that up, I'd love to chat with you about it, but it was definitely hard to get. I was glad I pre-ordered it. But it was excellent. So I just wanted to touch on that. Really this week, the stuff I got coming out, we're reading more into the X-Men stuff. We've got Invincible Iron Man, reading some Superman, some Wonder Woman. We've got a little bit of Spider-Man stuff going on. We got this is kind of a heavy week, so excited about that. What about you? Have you been reading anything lately or watching anything different lately?
I wouldn't say I've really read anything new, but I've caught up on a lot of my ongoing kind of series that are coming out every Sunday. Chainsaw Man, My Hero Academia, Sakamoto Days, Undead Unluck, Kaiju Number 8, Spy Family. Lots of stuff. Over the past couple weeks, I just have not. We've always had something going on whether it be a Sunday or something like that. But it's also nice too. I really, Sundays are great because that's when the new Shonen Jump chapters come out, and all of those series I just mentioned are published weekly in Shonen Jump. But the excitement fades really quick after you fly through the 15 to 20 pages, and then you're just kind of stuck. Like, oh man, now I gotta wait a week. But yeah, along with that, I also started reading through some more recent series that have come out via the Shonen Jump app. The two that come to mind are Kagurabachi. It's a revenge story about this guy who wields a magic-infused katana. Magic in this world is really kind of only used by a certain select group of society. They refer to themselves as sorcerers, and this main character's dad was a swordsmith that was renowned throughout the world of creating these just powerful katanas that just the magic properties that were infused in them are extremely deadly, and brought an end to a war that had been going on for decades. And once that war ended, he was like, yep, I'm not going to make a sword again. But then one day, Kagurabachi comes home and sees his dad is dead, and now he has to find the other 6 katanas that were stolen. So that one's really interesting. It's been getting pretty nuts from the last couple chapters I read the other day, and then nice. I want to look up the name of this just to make sure I don't get the name wrong. It was recommended. Yeah, okay, Mama Yu Yu. So it was recommended by a manga author I really like, Tatsuki Fujimoto. He is the author of Chainsaw Man, has done some really great one-shots. He also wrote Fire Punch. Some of my favorite works have come from him, and so he recommended Mama Yu Yu. And the premise of that one is, in this world, monsters and humanity coexist. There's been peace for several years, and so, but every set, number of years, a hero and a demon lord are born. And so the series kind of starts off with this premise of following this kid who is born as the hero of this world, but there's no really need for him. Like he's just a regular guy. Like he doesn't need to do anything until one day he comes into contact with a hero and a demon lord that are teleported to his world from another timeline. So at first, shenanigans kind of ensue, but now he's kind of given a purpose of trying to get, these people home, but also kind of grappling with the difference in his world, the demons and humanity are at peace. But in these other timelines, things are not going smooth. And so there's just a lot of animosity that he has to parse through. So I'd highly recommend Kagurabachi, Mama Yu Yu. Really interesting stories that I think take a lot of great elements from shonen, but really subvert them in some interesting ways. So yeah, that's what I got.
Dude, that's great. And for those of you wondering, I did not start watching Demon Slayer West Brooklyn.
Oh, shoot.
I have not started that. I did take some... What's that?
I was going to say, maybe that's our next series then, to get you to watch it.
Yeah, the ads are cool. So I thought, I want to start this, idea where we're looking at, hey, well, what was going on in the world when these properties were coming out? So I looked at the date that Gurren Lagann, the first movie, what is the subtitle of the first movie?
Childhood's End.
A childhood's end, exactly. So I looked at the date, which is September 6th, 2008, which is the Japanese release of this. And I was looking up some current events, but they're all pretty negative. I was hoping to find something interesting, but it's really just like a pretty bad car bombing, a pretty bad landslide, a couple hurricanes, some nuclear implications. But on the good side, T.I.'s "Whatever You Like" was the number one song in the United States.
That's what it's all about, baby.
Number one song in the UK was "I Kissed a Girl" by Katy Perry. Number one alternative hit, "Viva La Vida" by Coldplay, staying strong. And I used to listen to that song constantly. So
banger song.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a lot of negatives, but a few positives there on the music scene.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think it's always nice to get a little bit of context, on the time period. To add some additional context, it's not so much about current events, but the series Gurren Lagann and the two movies were produced and animated by the animation studio Gainax, however you want to pronounce it. You may recognize them from other series such as Neon Genesis Evangelion. And then just taking a look through some of their past productions here, let's see here. Sorry, I had these more readily available, but they slipped away from me. That said, yeah, Neon Genesis Evangelion, Nadia, The Secret of the Blue Water, a fantastic series right there, also done by Hideaki Anno. Let's see. Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt, Medaka Box Abnormal, Magical Wars. I realize probably a lot of that, Spencer, is not maybe super prevalent other than Neon Genesis and, of course, Gurren Lagann. But Gainax was pretty highly regarded for their quality. I think, Evangelion was a real tentpole for them. But I think that they have a lot of talent, and they've got a really cool background. They started animating in the back of a AC warehouse. And the first project they ever put was just like a test animation sample for a animation expo. And they, I think, finished the recording on a VHS the morning that it was supposed to be submitted for viewing. So they're a real grassroots team that all, really cared about animation when the studio was formed. And over the years, since Evangelion, Gurren Lagann, Panty and Stocking, there hasn't been a whole lot of output, unfortunately. The last thing they put out was a live action show that came out in around 2013. And I think the name of that was, let's see here. It's not listed in their kind of regular stuff just because it's not considered one of their anime. But let's see, live action EA's Rock, which I don't think got the best reception. And then in 2016, they were sued for $100 million in unpaid royalties for income received on works and properties that founder Hideaki Anno worked on. So it's safe to say they are not really the kind of pillar they used to be. But what is interesting is after Gurren Lagann came out, the director of Gurren Lagann, Hiroyuki Imaishi, he was in that initial preview kind of interview with the kind of various staff that worked on it. He left, and a lot of kind of other talented animators and individuals at Gainax that kind of wanted to work on something with that same heart and energy that Gurren Lagann had followed him, and he created the now massively successful Studio Trigger. And I'm going to list off a couple. You probably won't recognize these, but these are really highly regarded as like real bangers, and I've seen most of their work, and it's really something special. But Kill La Kill, Space Patrol Luluco, Kisniver, Little Witch Academia, Darling in the Franxx, SSSS Gridman, BNA, Brand New Animal, SSSS Dana Zinan, Delicious in Dungeon, and then they are making a sequel to the new Panty and Stocking with Garter Belt, which is really cool. And then they also put a movie out called Promare, where the main character looks a lot like Kamina. Here, let me send you over the poster here just so you can see it, because I think you'll get a real kick out of it. Here, I'll drop it right there for you. Let me know when you see it.
Oh, I see it.
Oh, that is a small picture. I apologize. It looked bigger when I saved it, but yeah, maybe you can get a tell. Just giant blue hair,
I'm
not wearing a shirt. But yeah, anyways, just to kind of give some background on Gainax, Studio Trigger, Gurren Lagann, all of these are kind of interconnected, but Gurren Lagann was, I think, the work that really propelled I don't know, the team at Gainax that wanted to work on something more, really kind of helmed by Hiroyuki, to, I don't know, really go after it. And they have the proof in their work that Gurren Lagann was not a fluke, which I think is really cool. So, I mean, that said, should we jump into the actual film?
I think so. Yeah, let's do it. Awesome.
So, I guess just to get a snapshot feel from you, what did you think? What were your thoughts? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Any highlights in particular?
Yeah, I loved it. I mean, just talking about the first movie, I think, honestly, I mean, a few highlights for me. For one, I thoroughly enjoyed jumping into this like knowing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
The comedy hit every time. The comedy was funny every time. It never felt like they forced something that wasn't like actually funny. Kamina immediately saying like, "Call me bro,"
yeah,
and then Simone proceeds to call him bro every single time, even when he's talking about him in past tense in like really serious moments.
Mm-hmm.
Which sometimes that kind of took me out of the moment. Like, okay. You can say the word brother, but it was just call me bro. You immediately know like everything you need to know about his character from that.
Yeah,
and I think the other moment is when you first meet Viral. I think is his name. Viral.
You got it. Yeah.
When he pulls out his like katana,
yeah.
and it goes on and on and on like I cry. And when you see it on a theater screen, it is going on for so long, and you're like, what?
Covering just like the whole width of the theater screen itself.
Yeah, it's moments like that is truly funny. Even in like a serious moment, like meeting really kind of the first like villain,
Yeah.
It's they're still being funny, and it didn't take away from the moment being like important. It was just also Kamina's just still going to be Kamina.
Yeah,
and I loved it.
I think you raise a really good point about the comedic timing. They really nail the balance. It doesn't feel like Guardians of the Galaxy 2, where every serious moment has to be cut with a joke. But even in Gurren Lagann, when there is a serious moment, exactly like you said, it's tasteful. Like it gets a chuckle out of you, but it doesn't take away from the gravity of what's going on.
Yep. Yeah, because there are a lot of very serious emotional moments that they don't stoop to that. They don't try to get into that well. When they give Simone time to be emotional, and they give characters time to grieve at times, and they do, they still let those characters have their moments without, trying to push a joke to help make the mood better, which is something like you mentioned in Guardians of the Galaxy. But I mean, in general, I think that can be a problem sometimes where, oh, we got to cut this with like a fart joke, and it's like, well, did we have to? I felt that way kind of about like the Barbie movie, where like the Barbie movie makes like a lot of progress in a direction. Like, you know, my feelings about certain parts of that movie aside, like you get to the end of that movie and you have this really powerful moment between like Barbie and her creator and the female image and, you know, all this kind of stuff, right? But then at the end of the day, the movie hits you with all of that emotion and all of that real, it tackles those real issues, but then it ends with a gynecology joke, and it's just kind of like, well, okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's like just an example that I use where like this movie didn't feel like it had to go to that well to, it knew that that their characters were strong enough to like stand up on their own moments. And at the end of the day, like I think those type of moments are why you go to the movies, you know, like you go to the movies to laugh and you go to the movies to cry, like, you know, and this movie, both of them kind of combined as one story. Like they give you all of that, you know?
Yeah. I think that's a fantastic point.
Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. I really couldn't agree with you more. I think there's a lot to love about not only this series, but seeing it in movie format. And I think there are so many parts of the movie that play well to seeing it on a big screen in a big theater that just hit so much harder than if you were to watch it at home. And yeah, I really don't have much to add because you summarized it super well. To maybe just kind of cut back to the beginning, because you made a really good point about humor and how it's used in this show, and like I agree with you that I think it's handled very well. I think there's really no better example than that first kind of opening act, you know, where you've got Simone kind of talking about his life as a digger. He finds that core drill,
yeah,
and he's looking around at it, and then as soon as he bumps into Kamina, he's like, "We're getting out of here." And then you get to see the the escape scene of them riding these pig moles all the way up to the top, and of course it fails. But you know, it's like fun hijinks. But then, you know, as they're all getting reprimanded, and that earthquake happens, you know, Simone is like, "We gotta run, like we gotta hide," and Kamina is saying, you know, "What are you talking about? We're gonna face it like a man." But then Simone's like, "No, we'll die." And it gets serious, because then Kamina is like, "Oh, you know what? That's right. Like that's how your parents died. I'm sorry for not being more conscious of that." You know, and he kind of pulls him in close.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I just think that it's a small example, but the fact that a show is able, or this movie, I keep saying show, but they're interchangeable. That said, sure, that they're able to shift gears so quickly and so successfully is really, really cool.
Absolutely, man.
But yeah, I mean, thoughts on the first act, you know, that whole kind of instance with the first gunman meeting Yoko. Yep. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, good question. So I think seeing this, like I said, like I didn't know anything about Gurren Lagann. I didn't know that this was a mech thing. I didn't know any of that, which I think is part of what made it so fascinating to watch, is because I had just come off of like this really emotional mech journey with Evangelion. So to see it treated a little differently was so fun. But I think what was cool is, even like I really still didn't understand that this was going to be a mech thing. Even when they first break out and they're confronted by kind of that dinosaur, I still didn't really know what was going on. And even if I understood that was like a robot or that there was a person in it, I still wouldn't have guessed that it would be like a mech type show. But I think that speaks to like the characters. Like it is more about the character interactions and kind of their friendship and stuff than it is like the mechs, which was true for Evangelion too. Like it was never really about the mechs. But as far as like the beginning of this, I thought it was awesome. Like I love that kind of little like Indiana Jones kind of bit where they kind of find that interesting little drill bit. And I love that his brother is like, "We got to get out of here. You know, we got to escape. Like, it's the great adventure. Like, we're in it together. Like, what could be better, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And Simone's like thinking about things rationally, like an actual human. And it's just funny to see. It's almost like Simone is like us in the real world, right? And Kamina's like what we all wish we could be. And so then it's like Simone and Kamina's like, well, yeah, let's break out of here, you know, let's break out of the mundane. And Simone's like, well, but like I have like a steady job and like I kind of like what I do, and like do we need to like take a risk? Like, you know, like my parents died, like I don't really want to die. Like, let's just kind of like what's wrong with what we're doing right now? And Kamina's like, everything is wrong. This sucks, you know, like who are they to tell us we have to stay here, you know? And these aren't quotes, but it's like, I think like the spirit of those characters immediately draws you in. And then for the world to like break open and then them see like that kind of like dino looking robot mech
The gunman
type thing. Yes, the gunman. Thank you for giving me that term. So
no problem.
It was kind of like my mind at this point in Act 1 is like spinning, and then they kind of find like a group of, you know, the rebels, you know, the resistance that's there, like fighting back against that, and they sort of aren't sure about him yet, and you know, it's just great. Like, and for me as a first time viewer, like I don't know if I trust those guys either. You know, it was all just really believable, and nothing was too far fetched. Like, it was just cool. I really enjoyed it.
Great to hear. I really I don't really have much to add, but I just love getting to hear your perspective on it. You know, having seen it for the first time, and it really is so cool because we really align on everything that you just shared. Like I feel so similar to the depictions of the characters, their personalities, how personable they are, and how just as with each new kind of story beat, you know, as the scope of this world opens up more and more, the real foundation and kind of the rooting of everything is through these characters. And because they are so relatable and well written, it never feels as though the story's getting away from them, which says a lot considering how massive of a scale things get, especially in that second movie. But not to put the cart before the horse, I think there is a lot to be said about, you know, when you write interesting characters that people care about and can see some of themselves in, you know, that's really the ultimate hook. Right.
Yeah. And of course, you'll follow them anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, the story has to be engaging, but stories can't just be engaging on their own. You know, you have to have that hook. And I think just that whole opening scene, the introduction of Yoko, and seeing how that trio's dynamic automatically forms. You know, you have Simone who looks up to Kamina who, as Yoko is trying to snipe this gunman in the back, yells at it and goes, a man always fights, you know, a man doesn't fight from behind. That's a coward. You know, we take our challenges head on. And then Yoko goes, okay, well, I'm a woman. So, and then, you know, you have the scene where they're crawling to the Lagann, and Kamina's like, move it, Thunder Thighs. And then she goes, what happened to the compliments a while ago? Just, you know, the banter is so
it's quick, incredible,
but it's so natural. It just doesn't feel forced.
It's like they didn't. It's like it just wrote itself. Mm-hmm. Like they created those characters, and all of their interactions just wrote themselves. Like it is so naturally written. And to be honest, like I'm sure that was difficult to do because, you know, it was probably written in a different language. Like I assume it was written in Japanese and this was dubbed into English, but like everything for me was flawless. Mm-hmm. It was super natural, super smooth. Yeah, the introduction to her was really fun. And you know, and everybody that was kind of part of that little faction, you know, but like I like that. Yes, her name's Yoko, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like, yes, Yoko's kind of like over sexualized, but it's like they don't overdo it in my opinion, and they never present her as like less than.
Yes.
She is incredibly efficient at what she does. She is a leader. She is going toe to toe with Kamina on all the issues. She's pretty much better at them at everything when they first meet her. You know, they kind of get better at everything as they go. She's already like the shit.
Yeah.
And she doesn't really need their help, you know? And like, so they paint her as incredibly strong and super cool first before they paint her as like, you know, the sexy comic relief at times.
Yes.
And the way she interacts with these characters is like, it's like they've known each other their whole lives. Yeah, like you said, like, you know immediately that like, okay, this is going to be fun. Like the rest of this journey is going to be a blast.
Absolutely. And I think in the show there's a little bit more build up, but I think what the movie really captures, and it really is no small feat to do, but establishing that chemistry so quickly but so solidly really propels everything forward. I think that whole opening, you know, bit where they finally burst out from the underground city in Lagann, and it's that awesome scene of the three of them sitting and it's kind of twirling, you know, and they're taking it all in. Simone and Kamina have never seen the sky. They've never gotten outside of the underground village. And, you know, it's cool. And there's little moments too where Yoko like looks at them and is like kind of like smiles at their wonder at, you know, something that she's already seen, but is really, you know, enamored with their excitement at getting to see this for the first time. And then immediately Lagann starts falling. Like, I just, it's so great because those moments can exist, but they never take away from each other, which is a theme that we've continually said. But, you know, we could probably talk ourselves till we're blue in the face pointing out every single one. But I think the fact we want to share those really just speaks to how well it's executed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Can you remind me, major spoiler, I guess, but you've warned people, but does Kamina die at the end of part 1?
Yeah.
Or does that all happen in part 2?
He dies like 3/4 of the way through part 1.
Okay.
So I mean, we can kind of just go through some of the story beats and really elaborate where we see fit. But after they break out, they rally with the Littner Village rebels, like you were saying. Then some gunmen show up to try and, you know, take them down. And that's where Kamina gets his mech, Gurren, hence the name Gurren for his, Lagann for Simone's, Gurren Lagann. And one aspect of this show is the whole through line is really like the power of, you know, the indomitable human spirit. Like kind of that belief in yourself and the will to just persevere is is really the what powers the mechs. It's what powers, you know, Simone, Yoko, Kamina, all of these characters to break past whatever limiters or barriers are in their way. And that's exemplified in how Kamina crawls into this gunman that is wired to only work with, you know, the Beastmen. And yet all he does is just go, come on, come on, come on. And then he like slams the controls hard enough and it works. And so it's just one of those things where, you know, in some cases, if you believe it, you can do it. But after they become the infamous Gurren Lagann, they meet Viral while they're out hunting for food, which is a great little fight. Both for the everlasting sword pull, along with just getting to see their, I don't know, their teamwork, if we want to call it that. You know, how Kamina throws Simone like a baseball to try and hit Viral when Simone, you know, pops out the drill on Lagann. But
that's the classic fastball special right there.
Oh, absolutely. And it gets even better too, though, when they're fighting Viral, and Common is like, "Hey, why do you get two heads?" And then he goes, "We're gonna combine." And the fact that one of the most pivotal parts of this whole show is the combining mechanic. You know, how they're able to assimilate with other gunmen or Daigunzans or whatever, is purely just because Kamina goes, "I'm just gonna put you on my head," and it looks really crude, and like the drill is right next to Kamina, and he's like, "Yeah, see, we're now we're gonna kick your ass." And
I know, like I loved it. It's because it's kind of what's interesting is, and I don't know if maybe in the show they might get into more detail because they have more time to flesh stuff out, but it's like, you know, you don't really need to know how the mechs work. Like they don't take the time to like tell you. They just kind of show you, and you just are kind of left to know like, okay, well, like it takes like willpower, and it takes like desire, and it takes, you know, effort. But then like the combining, it's not like there's like, okay, well this type and this type and this type can combine, but this type can only combine in this location, and like you don't need to flesh it out. It's just cool. They just do it because they wanted to do it, so they did it. And like Kamina wants to look cooler, he wants to incorporate that, so he does. And that's fine. Like I enjoyed that they didn't waste time explaining why that was able to work, or to show me the pieces of how it worked, or how, you know, the different mechs, you know, electrical would be routed in that case. You know, like it doesn't matter is my point, you know. And that was kind of refreshing. Because we live in a day and age on the internet where people love to poke holes in things. Oh, well, that could never actually happen. Mm-hmm. But it's like, sometimes you have to ask a question, but like, who cares? Because like, if it works in the movie, then it worked.
Rest assured, first off, couldn't agree with you more. But rest assured, in the show, they do not break that down at all. They just kind of, all I think Liron does is say, "It looks like Lagann is able to fuse with any gunman."
Great. That's a great line.
And that's it. And that is that's all you need.
Yeah, that's all you need.
Because I think in the same way that Neon Genesis Evangelion, and that was cited as one of their inspirations when working on this, is not about the Evas, it's about the people piloting them. The same can absolutely be said for Gurren Lagann. It's not about the gunmen. It's not about Gurren Lagann. The robots are cool, and they're really great, like, extensions of these characters, which can be seen in how I don't know if you noticed it, but how the gunmen react when they get hit. You know, like when Gurren Lagann gets like thrown to the wayside, it like winces the face on top, like in pain, or when, you know, Kamina's saying like a determined thing, it puts on like a tough guy face of like, yeah. Like it's cool that they are less like robots and more of just extensions of these bombastic characters. I really am with you. I couldn't be happier that they don't break down why this works and how it works, because it doesn't. I don't need that, because at the end of the day, the hook is the characters, and they're pulling me through. So
it was freaking cool. So who cares?
Exactly.
I loved it. And that's a moment where not only is it cool, but it's also funny. Mm-hmm. But it's also in character. Yes. And it achieves it moves the story along. Like that first fight that they have where they're kind of getting their asses kicked by like, it's funny because when you've seen both movies, I guess for me, and I've seen the scope of like what like an actually big fight is, mm-hmm. versus like that first one, it's kind of funny that they struggled on that first one. Yeah. Because they'll go on to do just like cosmic things.
Oh yeah.
And where it's like that, but that first one, it's like those guys are back for revenge. Oh, and damn, they almost won, you know?
Yeah.
It's fun.
Well, because it's great too, because it's, you know, even with his back against the wall, Kamina continues to posture that he's just this larger than life. I'm not scared. I don't care about anything. And in that first fight, he's thrown into like the rubble, and he's looking at a human skull.
Right.
And that's really kind of the only time you see Kamina let let his guard down. And he has that moment of like, oh, like this, like I could die. This could end. And then as soon as it happens, he snaps out of it, and he's like, "What are you talking about?" Like, kind of slaps himself a little bit, like, "What? What am I worried about that for? We're not going to lose." And I think that's just such a, I don't know, that's one of my favorite scenes in the show. They kind of spend a little more time on it, not a crazy amount, but I think the movie does a great job, because in the show, it's insinuated that that's his dad.
Okay.
Because he sees like his dad's cape that he used to wear. That's where Kamina gets the cape from. And so they aren't able to really, I don't know why. They could have, but I'm not here to nitpick. I didn't make it. But that it's just kind of a cool way for Kamina to kind of go, you know, hey, like, I'm only human. I am like mortality is the thing. Looks like my dad died on the surface, but you know, I'm gonna keep that dream alive, you know? And I don't know. It's just cool to have that, I don't know, to have those little character moments, because everyone gets them at one point or another.
Yeah, they do.
But yeah, it's a really good point though, that, you know, the two protagonists just get the shit kicked out of them. One of them has a mini existential crisis, and then they win by doing the fastball special by throwing Simone into a mountain, and then he comes back around and skewers them. But yeah, I think that's like, I don't really know how to maybe characterize like the quote unquote first act, but I would say that we kind of hit the second act of the movie after that fight with Viral.
Yeah.
Because that's the first time that Gurren and Lagann combine. Viral kind of gets the shit kicked out of him a little bit, but not before getting some licks in on the guys. Kamina is kind of pissed because he's like, man, you know, why are we getting thrown around like that? And so then they kind of start to set off to go, you know, liberate other villages and get more people to join their cause. And that's where we get to kind of what we talked about at the top of this episode, but the kind of truncated travel section of all the different stops they make, people they visit. They meet Rasiu and Gimme and Dari. They meet the black siblings, Kitan and his three sisters. And then we kind of just jump to running into the kind of first big bad of the series, and that's the it's I think it's called the Daigunzan, the boat looking thing, and the general of that is T-Milf, the giant ape looking guy. And so that's kind of where things really ramp up a notch. As you were saying, you know, the first fight you see with Kamina and Simone, they get their butts kicked, but now here they are fighting the biggest gunman they've ever seen. And ultimately, it's, in my mind, a really great moment that I think the movie captures really well. I think the show does a great job too, but all of the story beats of this whole arc, where, you know, it starts with them planning, it starts with them getting the Daigunzan trapped in the dirt, you know, with Simone's quick thinking, and then getting support from all of the other additional gunmen that have rallied to them from other liberated villages. And of course, this is where we get our first really big downturn in terms of emotions in the series. But yeah, what did you think about this kind of arc of taking the Daigunzan and fighting Ty-Milf and you know, that whole bit? We can kind of start from the front end, you know, both Kamina and Simone working together to take that thing on and go from there.
Yeah, well, I think for one, like you said, I mean the Dai Gunzan is sick. I mean it's just a literal dreadnought. It is so cool. I love it, and I think that they do a good job. Like as soon as you see that, you know that's going to be like a real test, you know. And and honestly, you don't know. Like I don't have any interaction with a lot of the characters that are all of a sudden a part of the team. So like, to me, they're all pretty expendable. So going into that fight as a first time viewer, I don't know what's going on in the second movie. So I'm kind of like, damn, they're about to lose like all these cool new people that I'm trying to learn how to learn their names and figure out who they are. And
absolutely,
you know, and I mean the fight itself is cool. I mean, it's fun to see them use different strategies and everything like that. I think if I remember right, they kind of kick its ass and then it like comes back, right?
Yeah, so I will say they start with getting their butt kicked because it's just them initially when they're trying to assault the Daigunzan.
That's right.
And basically they're getting tossed around and Yoko's like, you guys got to get out of there. Like, you know, we've got to regroup and kind of figure out a strategy. And Kamina's like, no, a man never runs away. Like I'm not running from this. And Yoko's like, classic. Well, you can't fight again if you're dead. And then Simone steps up to the plate and goes, bro, I've got an idea. And then Kamina's like, forget it, I'm not running. And he's like, no, not running, but just let me do this. And so that's where he comes up with the idea of basically surrounding the perimeter of the Daigunzan, shooting those drills in, detonating them, and getting the Daigunzan stuck. And then that's when they retreat. They link up with all of those other gunmen and really kind of start planning that the major offensive to take the Daigunzan for themselves. And,
right, yeah, Kamina wants to steal it.
yeah, he's like, we're going to put Lagann right on the top of that thing and call that baby ours. And,
so fun.
Yeah, well, and one real kind of key point here is when they're doing that planning, you get to see a real character development moment between Yoko and Kamina, and unfortunately Simone, who catches a stray unintentionally, of course. But yeah, what did you think about the Kamina and Yoko, Kissing?
Yeah, those two are perfect together. I really like them together. I don't really like, especially in the first movie, I don't like any idea of Simone. With her at all, but just because I think, just emotionally, I don't think he's ready for that. But
he's also young too, so
yeah, I don't blame him for wanting her. Who wouldn't? But I think, gosh, Kamina and her are like made for each other. Like I said, like those characters just write themselves. Like they are incredible together. So to see them kind of, because they kind of they banter, like you said, that's a good word to use for them, because they kind of, it's not that they don't have differences, but they are able to work through them, even though they're both pretty stubborn. But that's kind of what makes them perfect.
Yeah,
they're both like absolutely go-getters. They're both good leaders. They come to blows, but they they always work it out. And I think they always both have good intentions. And so I think there's a trust there. But yeah, I thought they were fantastic together. I really liked that portion.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. It's kind of nuts how much happens just in that small span of time, because you basically have Yoko telling Kamina, hey, let me pilot Lagann. I don't think Simone is up to the task. Knowing full well that she wants to be the one to make sure he gets back in one piece. And Kamina, rebukes that and just says, no, it's got to be with Simone. I know he can do it. I believe in him and he believes in me, and we're going to win tomorrow. And that's when they kiss. And then she's like, just make sure you can, like make it back. And he's like, I'll repay that kiss 1,000 times over. And she's like, you could just say that you'll kiss me when you're back or something like that. Because he says a line that is so Kamina in its delivery of like, I'm going to kiss you 1,000 times over. And she's like, you can just, okay, buddy, we can just keep it at, I'll pay you back or whatever. And then, yeah, I think you raise a really good point with Simone. And I almost think too, despite the moments where it's like he falls into her boobs or whatever, I think that scene is also just kind of meant to show that Simone doesn't really know a lot about the world, about himself, about, relationships or relations with others. And so the fact that hits him hard, I think is tough because it's like he loves Kamina. He has feelings for Yoko, and it's like he knows it shouldn't matter, but it does. And he's like, why does it matter? This is dumb. Why am I struggling with this? And as we come to see, it impacts him significantly when it comes to taking over the Daigunzan, which I use as a segue because now we're talking about my all-time favorite scene. I think in any anime, any show, movie, what have you, the let's see you grit those teeth. Oh, baby.
Yeah.
Come on now. That, like, I remember watching that the first time, and I was so shocked that Kamina just decks him in the face. Mainly just because I was like, whoa. And then he delivers, which I will say also is one of my all-time favorite lines, don't believe in yourself. Believe in the me that believes in you.
Right.
Like, and if you don't, I'll always be here to belt you one. Oh, like to this day, it gives me like chills just because I think it's such a powerful line, a powerful scene. I think that it's further elevated in terms of impact by what happens almost immediately after that. But yeah, what did you think of that whole interaction?
It's just really good brotherly love, really good pep talk. Honestly, it's exactly what Simone needed because, like you said, he was incredibly distracted following the kissing incident from the night before.
Mm-hmm.
Understandably. But yeah, I mean that absolutely, dude. It fires you up. I mean, and what's cool is they pay that off so many times over through like the rest of the movie and the next part too. Like that moment in the moment, you're kind of like when you're watching it, you're kind of like, oh, that was like a little bit much, maybe. But it really impacts Simone positively for the rest of his life.
Absolutely, and I think it's cool that you get it twice. The first is when Kamina jumps out of Gurren and punches Simone in the face, and then as soon as he jumps back on the deck, he gets jumped by Timilf and Viral and all of the Beastmen, and it is not looking too hot. And Simone is kind of struggling because he's like, I want to help Kamina. I'm stressed out. What do I do? And then sure enough, Simone! And then it just shows the fist from Gurren being thrown at Lagann's head. Just the kind of, as I was saying earlier, the expressiveness that the robots have in getting, like the same emote or emoting whenever, expressions or actions happen. I just thought it was so cool because the Lagann's head like recoils in the same way that Simone's did. And I just that whole scene is in my mind just executed so well because after that they do the first ever Giga Drill break, which fills my body with just like the most like testosterone I think ever.
Sure.
I don't know. I just think it's so cool the fact that
it was cool.
that they use the sunglasses as a boomerang.
I know, it's awesome.
Oh, and then just Giga Drill break. Oh, I could watch that fight a million times over, but I don't because it's sad. And I've been meaning to ask, what did you think about the unfortunate revelation that comes after that?
Yeah, I certainly did not expect that, especially they just had a ton of momentum. Like I felt like Kamina was literally unstoppable. Like they've defeated everything. And they had some success in the fight, and I felt like, well, honestly, so many times you watch a show like this, and it's like, well, the heroes are always going to win. Now, like Evangelion, kind of like gets to the point where, did they ever win? I don't know. Like it gets in really deep. But I think like a show like this, you definitely expect the heroes to win, at least from my first time watching it. And so to see him go down was like, well, damn. Not only does that suck for Simone, but he was also like probably the most fun character to watch. He's probably my favorite character of the show. So I definitely didn't expect him to go down. I went into this, like, if you remember, I was kind of like, oh, maybe all these ancillary characters are toast, but then for like one of our main heroes to suffer was kind of very unexpected. And it's one of those moments, like I was talking about at the top, where they do a really good job letting a moment like this, a devastation type moment, have its time. They didn't try to rush into any sort of comedic moment to break it up or whatever, but like not only did they have the balls to kill him, but they gave him his send off, and it was actually pretty powerful.
No comments, no notes. You summarized that perfectly. I think in the show, I remember I watched the episode where Kamina dies, and I immediately looked at the preview text for the next episode, and it said something about like, oh, Kamina or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe he comes back. Nope. No, he does not. And yeah, it leaves a huge hole. Not narratively or like it takes anything away, but it's felt. You watch this boisterous, loudmouth character kind of throwing their weight around every chance they get, but also just being really genuine and true to themselves, vanish. And I think it really sells how Simone's personality just takes a hard 180 in the time following. I think that the way that we kind of see Simone process the loss of Kamina is really, really special in a couple ways, because I just think that it's very emblematic. I think if anyone has processed grief or really any form of loss or something that really kind of impacts you to the core, I think it's really well done where he tries to kind of force his way through by piloting Gurren Lagann by himself. Rossi's like, let me help. And Simone's like, no, you're not bro. I don't need you. I can do this by myself. Right. And to then have the end result be Lagann throw up, because it's being overloaded with these feelings that don't really have like a channel, so to speak. In all the other instances where we see that core wheel fill up with spiral energy, as we come to learn what it is, in this one, it kind of shows that it's going all over the place, because it's not as if the spiral energy is a will to move forward. It doesn't know where to go. So what if it can't go anywhere, it's got to go somewhere. And so I think that just the way they handle Simone grieving and navigating this immense loss is very, very touching, and has a kind of weight to it that, while shown in various ways, like in how he's carving statues of Kamina out of stone, and how, I don't know, just his overall demeanor is very negative and harsh. I don't know. I think it's a really well-rounded.
It is.
I don't know. The words are escaping me a little bit, but I think it's just a really good example of how a character would react. I feel like genuinely to something like that. Admittedly, it's a fictional character's passing, but I mean, when that person is such an anchor for you, what do you do then?
Yeah, no, I agree. I like I said, like they do a great job living it up in the good times and the humor, and then when the characters have a moment like this, like they let it simmer, and they just do it really well. The highs and lows are all really well earned. Yeah, it was definitely tough to watch him kind of spiral, for lack of a better term, kind of down into his into that really anxious part of his mind that like really there was one person that was able to help him escape that can't anymore, and him trying to come to grips with that was not easy to watch.
Yeah, and who would have thunk that his solace and salvation would come from Nia?
Yeah, so I want to. That's the name of the Spiral King's daughter, right?
Yes.
So okay, so one of my issues that I have with this movie is I don't know that it like story-wise prepared me for the Spiral King.
No.
At all. Like part 2 immediately, which we'll get into in the next episode, but part 2 really like you're thrown right into the fire in needing to understand the Spiral King, how he works, how his generals work, the purpose of him and everything, and you kind of learn more as that movie goes on, for sure. By the end of it, you get it. But I will say, like, part 1, it does such a good job building up the cast of characters and the main characters and their journey and their origin that they kind of forgot to mention, like, who the Spiral King is, why we're even worried about him in the first place, like why we're kind of fighting those guys, and like I understand like good versus evil. I'm fine with seeing that they're bad guys and that we're fighting them. I don't need too much more, but I did feel like towards the end of this movie, and as she's introduced, and they do that fight against the big ship that they steal and everything, like with the generals and everything like that, it is kind of murky. Like at that point, in the theater, I'm sort of like, well, okay, who are these people? Like, when are we going to get to know more about those guys? And I get it; it's a part 1, but I did feel like that was an area that I wish they had sowed the seeds of the Spiral King being a really big, like being a problem. At least, people perceive him as a problem.
Yeah.
The whole movie, because then you kind of get to this and you're like, oh, okay.
Absolutely. That's like, if we're going to go to kind of differences between the show and the movie, the show does a way better job at kind of painting the Spiral King as being this looming threat that, we've got to look out for. We've got to be careful. He's the whole reason we're underground. Whereas in the movie, we only really get that where he says, or the chief of the village says, the Spiral King forced everyone underground, or we're not allowed to go to the surface, or, he's the one that's pulling all the strings. I think Time Elf and Adina, the generals of him, make a comment, mainly when Adine, the person with the scorpion tail, is talking to Nia and says like, oh, the Spiral King doesn't have any use for dolls that ask for more or something like that.
Yeah.
And the only real framing we get is that, oh, okay, Lord Genome's kind of a prick. He like just threw his daughter away in the garbage. That's weird, but
right.
All right, whatever. So the hook for us to really care about Lord Genome isn't really there. And I think that's just really one of the main downsides of the movie format is, they've got to fit everything in, and it's really tough to take a little break to give the exposition of who he is and his big role in this. The prologue at the start of the movie basically talks about his whole backstory, but never explicitly says it's him. And I would almost think that maybe you do that and just say, hey, yeah, this is the Spiral King. He forced everyone underground after turning on other members of the Spiral race because he was afraid of the anti-spirals or whatever. But I don't really know what the answer is other than it's just kind of poor execution.
No. Well, it's not that it's poor. Like, I mean, it is, but I will say, like, it didn't, like, necessarily totally detract from it. Because, to be honest, it was really clear watching this that, like, hey, if you want to know more, it's there. Like, you can watch the show. Like, they made that really clear. So I never felt like the answers weren't there or like it wasn't earned, because I had the understanding that this was a show. And that doesn't mean that these movies can't stand alone really well. I had a great time watching them. But just if I could have a gripe about it, I did just to your point, like something similar to like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, right? The first movie, Fellowship of the Ring, it opens with like a really quick couple minutes sequence of why the ring's important. They tell you, okay, well, in the beginning, X, Y, and Z rings were made. But there's one to rule them all. They kind of show you like a quick battle of like the ring getting, yada yada yada, right? So then, by the time they like jump into the Shire and like the story, that okay, this ring exists. And it's, this is in a world where know nothing about the Hobbit, but like the ring exists and it's super powerful. So then when you see it on screen, you say, oh, okay, so he has the ring. And obviously that's going to change everything if he puts it on, right? Mm-hmm. So like something like that where they're like, okay, like in the beginning, like there was this and the Spiral King takes like this place. And this is kind of what he's done to this world. And then you jump right into a character that's like oppressed by that. And then have him fight his way back to, breaking free from that. Like that would, I think, just something small like that, a couple minutes off the top, would have made a huge difference by the end of part one, going into part two. Because the Spiral King stuff was like, honestly, it's actually pretty similar to the Nerve, or to the, not Nerve, sorry, those are kind of the good guys in Evangelion, but it's similar to the, gosh, what is the faction that they just kind of like throw at you at the last second in Evangelion? I'm trying to remember.
Seele?
Just like the Human Instrumentality Project in general. Okay. I feel like they kind of build the characters up and the character moments and this and that with the characters and the mechs and Nerve, and they're kind of doing the thing, and obviously there's a bad guy. But then it's like all of a sudden it's human instrumentality is all that matters in like the last 4 or 5 episodes, and then that's where the show goes, and it like shifts and goes down that. And I think one of my gripes was like, well, I wish that they had sowed the seeds of that like super early, so that you had a really good understanding of human instrumentality, because by the time you get to the end of it, you really have no idea what it even is or where the characters fit into that or what's happening to know if you like it or hate it. And in this case, like, it's not as severe, but with the Spiral King, it's kind of like, well, why is he bad? I was trying to kind of figure out whether they were redeemable or not, or whether they're all evil, or whether they started out good, or it was just kind of difficult. Like I said, they do pick up all the pieces by the end of part 2, but at least in part 1, I was pretty confused on what the hell was going on with Spiral.
I'm with you 100% on that. I think the examples you gave of how they could have done it are great, because I think ultimately what we're talking about is really kind of how the end of this movie happens, where it is just a speed run to the end. Like as soon as Nia is introduced and Adine shows up, it's like, okay, all of a sudden now we're meeting Guame, the armadillo, Cytomander, the guy with the wings, and and then it just turns into this giant, like large scale warfare. It's nuts, and I think those rapid introductions also just tie into the whole like, what's up? We're the four supreme generals of the Spiral King, and it's like, okay, well, we got to know the first one, and now these three just show up, and now you guys are with the Spiral King, and now it's what's going on? And I don't know, it kind of, in an effort, I think, to kind of fit everything into that last 45 minutes, it feels like they made a conscious decision of, okay, we're not really going to use a lot of time for exposition, but we're going to make it look really good. And I primarily am just piggybacking off of kind of this conversation of the Spiral King, because I really feel like after the introduction of Nia, which has some really sweet character moments between her and Simone, she's the one that kind of helps him open his eyes to not being so downtrodden on life following the loss of Kamina. I think that, the realization that she's been thrown away by the Spiral King, who, even if we don't know him, we can recognize that she is like processing this in real time and is like, what? I mean, her introduction is great because she's a great catalyst for Simone, but everything else that is happening in the background narrative with the four supreme generals and the Spiral King, it's all just kind of nonsense a little bit, because you're not really told what to think. You're just kind of thrown into it, which is fine, I guess, because like you said, they do tie everything up with a bow at the end of part 2. But I don't know, it's I think a fair, maybe not even critique, maybe a nitpick of like, hey, I think this could have been done a little bit better. But I will say that whole final fight scene is incredible. Like the whole final stretch where, Yoko and Adine are fighting on the dock of the Daigunzan, hand-to-hand combat with her sniper and everything. I think all of the other gunmen kind of breaking out to try and combat all of a sudden these forces that have just been beset upon them are, really cool. But I think the best part is just watching Simone climb up the Suzaku gunman that's holding Nia like it's going to drop her for a public execution.
Yeah.
I thought that scene was so cool. And then Lagann swooping in to catch him. And it just is that awesome scene where Rossiu and Simone combine, and Simone standing on top of Lagann with his arms crossed. And he does that big speech where he's like, we evolved beyond the person we were before. That's how a drill works. My drill is my soul. And, and then he like rips the wings off of another gunman and slaps him onto the back of Gurren Lagann.
That's the stuff that's just awesome.
And it's like, yeah, I fly now.
I know. My gosh.
What were your thoughts on kind of the final stretch of that whole fight scene?
So I will say, while it is kind of chaotic, it's not like too hard to follow, and I also think like it doesn't really detract from it too much. Like, I love all the Nia stuff; she's fantastic. I love that his core drill like is what opens the box, or his little core drill is what opens the box for her to like be released from her, basically coffin is what it would have ended up being. And I think, him finding her in the trash is like the perfect illustration of like him being at just absolute rock bottom, and then her just, more figuratively like pulling him out of it, and I think she's a good inspiration for him to like kind of finish the fight. All of the stuff from there, like, yeah, the wings, it's all the little things. It's like earlier you touched on them utilizing the sunglasses. It's like the stuff that looks like a design feature that would not be removable and that serves no purpose. They use, they take wings off something else and just he places them on his back and they work now.
Yeah.
It's like it's that level of creativity that I think makes this universe more fun. Whereas like in Evangelion, it is very technical, everything has to be believable, everything has to like actually work, whereas this is kind of like, well, if you can think it, like you can do it, and that what it does is it almost raises the stakes because, okay, well, if that's possible, then anything's possible. And it really just comes down to who has the willpower and the creativity to be able to, put their mind to it and never give up. Like that's who's going to win. So it, like I said, like it leads to these bigger cosmic battles because it has to, it's the mind that's going to win. And I think all this stuff visually at the end was awesome as we were getting like shaken violently and we were getting like punched in the back and stuff's flying around our legs. We're getting squirted with water. It was just like so much fun.
Yeah, that's one tidbit we haven't really touched on other than the initial intro. But yeah, I mean every fight scene, every movement of a mech, like the chair moves. If like Adine fights by summoning a bunch of water, you get sprayed in the face. When the Shizuku Cytomander gunman shows up, like a huge gust of wind hits you. Yeah, really just cool effects that add to what is just a visual feast of a climax to the first film. I think they do a great job of making the payoff really, I don't know, just memorable. Thinking back to that fight scene is really cool, and I think you hit the nail on the head about how the mind and the will are the real driving forces, because that's how the Gurren Lagann works, right? It goes off of spiral energy, which is willpower, and the will to persevere through whatever obstacle is in front of you, and we really get to see that in practice multiple times, but especially in that final push after Simon kind of gets his mojo back.
Yeah.
So I guess, kind of closing in on our final thoughts here. I would really love to know, what would you give this out of 10 drills?
Ooh, I like that. I thought that, I don't really know what else story-wise there is to touch on. I mean, they kind of win the final battle. I think Kamina's gone. Nia's introduced. I will say, just as you kind of get to the end of it, is where those characters like Rossiu, is that how you pronounce that name?
Yeah, Rossiu.
Rossiu and like Kitan start to like play a role in the movie, whereas like Kitan kind of sort of tries to insert himself as like a de facto leader. And like there's moments where those characters start becoming a part of the greater story. And while there is a part 2, like in part 1, as I'm watching that, they, other than them kind of showing up right before the Dai Gunzen fight, I think is how you'd say that. I don't know anything about them. So like for Kitan to step up as like a leader, like I don't know, maybe he's badass. I have no idea. So like I think there was just a few things at the end as they were kind of closing things down where it's like, it's moments like that where the show, I'm sure, did a really good job showing that like Catan was kind of like this, he really looks fondly at someone like Kamina, like he wants to be like him. He's kind of that fearless young type, but he's like a little bit too big for his britches, like they make that clear enough, and like Rossiu is kind of like he's very calculated in how he thinks. He's also a good leader, but he's kind of like he goes about things completely differently than Kamina would have, right? So like they do enough to show you that about those characters, but for my first time watching it, like I really have, especially having only seen part one, I really had no idea who they were, why they deserved to be there. So just kind of some little weird things at the end, but I think generally all the emotional bits really hit well. Visiting Kamina's grave and everything. I think that this movie is fantastic. I also think it, like I was saying early on, I think it did a good enough job showing you like, hey, this is kind of a general overview, but if you want more, like it exists. And it exists in the show. And I think that for a first-time viewer, it does exactly what they set out to do. It made me want to, having only seen part one in theaters, I really wanted to know more. Like I was hooked on the next part. I mean, we walked out of the theater and we had originally had tickets to go see the second part in non-4DX. And we were like, we got to go see this again. It has to be here in 4DX. We got to see the second part. And I felt like I was definitely hooked. So although there were some issues, not really understanding the spiral piece, not understanding some of the characters just because they moved 8 hours or 9 hours of footage down to 2.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like it kept me from wanting to know more. In fact, it probably helped me desire more content. So I think it was actually pretty good. I didn't think it was slow. I think some people might think it was kind of slow, but if you put yourself in a spot where you've never met any of those characters, it moves fast enough where you are understanding those characters. I would honestly give this, I want to say 9, but I feel like that's too high because I got to leave room for it to like really blow my socks off.
Okay.
But maybe I'll say 8.5 mechs. I'll meet it in the middle. 8.5 drills.
I was gonna say, yeah, we're on the drill system.
Yeah, we're gonna do 8 big drills and then like a little drill key.
I love
that
it.
Counts as a half drill.
Yeah, I think.
But I loved it.
Well, I'm really glad to hear that. I think that's a totally fair review. I honestly would give it the same. I think 8.5 is really what the movie earns, and I think that it's well paced. I think that they do a really great job to the best of their ability, fitting as much as they did in, and as concisely as they did. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It leaves you wanting to see part 2. It leaves you wanting to see more. It leaves you wanting to really get to experience kind of what that next chapter is going to be. And so I think the fact that it leaves you feeling that way really says a lot about how effective the movie is. So yeah, I'd give it 8.5 drills as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
Because you come at it as like for me, this is my first introduction to Gurren Lagann. Mm-hmm. Whereas you've seen like the 9-hour version of this or whatever. However, I don't know how long the show episodes are. Yeah. But say they're like a half hour and it's 30 episodes, it's like a half hour and there's like 15 episodes or 30 episodes or something.
Mm-hmm.
So like, so you've seen like the longer format, the characters, about the Spiral King. Is this boring to you at all? Like watching it in movie form, are you ever like, oh man, they're wasting their time on this or?
Oh no, not at all. I mean, there are parts that I'd maybe want to see more of, but I think that the way that they structure the movie, it almost feels like you're watching a different retelling of the story, which is really great because it feels fresh and they add some new scenes and new tidbits here and there that are really great. And I think flesh out certain parts that maybe weren't able to be done in the show. And so, yeah, I really enjoy how they go about the films and how they have structured them. And truthfully, I have never once found myself, I've seen these movies several times now, but I've never found myself bored.
Yeah.
Just because I think they do such a great job at really kind of capturing the spirit of the show and putting it in a new packaged up format. So
yeah, I thought part 1 was good enough that I don't know that if their goal of doing the movies was twofold. Like, for one, let's make movies, sure, but it's also like, well, let's give people a condensed version if they don't want to watch the show. But I think, like, for a part 1, at least, like, this portion, A Childhood's End, I mean, one of their goals is also probably like, maybe this gets people to want to watch part 2, but also maybe it gets people to want to watch the show. And I think that for a part 1, this really succeeded. Mm-hmm. Like, I left wanting to watch part 2 or to watch the show. I wanted to know more. I thought it was funny. Like, so I think this was a really successful part 1.
Yeah.
The things that they omitted, little details on the Spiral King, little character moments thing, it leaves you wanting more so than it does leaving you frustrated. Like, oh my God, how could they omit that detail about the Spiral King? I felt like I left the theater like wanting more, and that's exactly what their goal was, in my opinion. So I would say really successful part 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I also think this as a movie compared to like End of Evangelion. Now, I haven't seen the Rebuild movies. We're going to tackle those here coming up, but yeah. I think like this was really a lot more approachable than something like Evangelion. Evangelion is a pretty adult story. Even it's not that it's not gripping, but something like this, you kind of feel like, oh, I could turn this on and have fun watching this and getting into the story. Whereas like Evangelion, maybe it's because like I've seen it now to know where it goes, but it's kind of like I look back at that and think, man, if I was getting someone into Evangelion for the first time, it's almost like, not that it's a chore, but it's like you almost have to
be
like ready for
someone.
That.
Like, you have to give them like a sit down chat. Like, okay, this is what you're gonna watch.
Like, hey, if we're gonna do this. Whereas, like, this is like, I could show this to anybody and they would think it's fun. And that's the beauty of the movies, is the movies aren't too long. It's like, well, if they don't love it, then that's fine. But at least they'll find some humor out of it, or they'll find some enjoyment out of it, or it's at least visually appetizing, Like, I think that it's, this is a great part 1. Yeah. 8.5 is a good score.
I think so too. And for those of you out there that are curious about our thoughts on part 2, well, rest assured that'll be coming down the pipeline sooner rather than later, before it leaves our memories, considering it's been a bit since we saw these movies. But that said, I don't really have anything else to add. Spencer, anything left about this film you wanted to throw out to the fans?
No, I think we'll save it all for part 2. Got a lot of different things to talk about in part 2, so.
Oh, absolutely. Well, awesome. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to the HiroBabble podcast. We're really thankful that you stuck with us for this review of Gurren Lagann, the film part 1, Childhood's End. I'm Michael, the guy who's seen the show before.
And I'm Spencer, the guy who's seen part 1 of the show before.
And we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.